In the history of football, there's always been players who constantly grab headlines for the wrong reasons. Despite possessing brilliant talent, these type of players are often targeted by the media for either their attitude, a singular moment on the pitch, or moments that occur away from the pitch. Essentially, they're players of two tales. Think Pogba and his haircuts, Neymar and his diving, and Bruno Fernandes with his attitude. Bruno Fernandes, or should I say Bruno Fernandes, has been constantly talked about since his arrival to the Premier League in the January 2020 transfer window. Having joined the United side that was led by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer during some turbulent times, and being relatively unknown before his move to Old Trafford, many people questioned if Bruno was going to be the player that United needed to turn around not only that current season, but also the fortunes of the club. Well, Bruno Fernandes hit the ground running and instantly caught everyone's attention, due in large part to his goal-scoring ability and creativity from the center attacking midfielder position. Having continued to show his quality in all his seasons so far at United, it's fair to say that he's definitely been one of United's best signings in the post-Fergie era. However, haters are gonna do what haters are gonna do. He has become a very polarizing player due to how he's talked about in footballing discourse. Bruno's reputation isn't necessarily perfect, as he has received a large chunk of criticism since he's been thrusted into the spotlight. For all the praise that he does receive from media and United fans, you could honestly say that he receives the same amount of criticisms back from the media and from United fans. And real quick boys, if you're new to the channel and enjoying the video, enjoying the content, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Weekly video essays, weekly EAFC 24 content, so make sure you hit that noty bell, don't miss a single upload. And if you're not new to the channel boys, welcome back. Glad to have you guys around for another video. Keep showing your support so the channel can grow. But with that being said boys, let's get into the criticism and the praises of Bruno Fernandes. In football, the majority of the time, you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to ensure that your team is going to win. And I don't think it's controversial to say that in most cases, you want to make sure that your team has the ball. You know, you have most of the possession. Unless you're Burnley, Atletico Madrid, or any Jose Mourinho side. However, for Bruno Fernandes, one of the main criticisms he receives is that he's too wasteful on the ball as a result of how many times he's giving away possession. Being a focal point in the United team, there's always going to be a critical eye watching what he does with the ball. There's been multiple games where Bruno has stacked up some pretty high numbers for possessions lost, including 34 times against Istanbul in 2020, 28 times against Forest in 2023, and 48 total times across 2 games against Everton in the 21-22 season. In fact, by December of this season, Bruno led the league in possessions lost per game. And the final bit of numbers that I'll throw out there is that in his entire time at United, Bruno has lost possession of the ball 2,967 times and counting. With how turbulent United's been since Bruno joined, it's easy to see why he gets so much attention in this statistic. When the times get tough and you begin to build inconsistent form, you want your best players to get on the ball and create something out of nothing in moments where you are on your last legs. But when you're losing the ball so many times and you're already in a losing situation, it begs the question of how far can this star player really take you. However, for me, this statistic really isn't as black and white as it seems, since there's some pretty big factors that play into these numbers that a lot of people just kind of tend to overlook. The biggest one of all, which for the most part invalidates the lost position criticism, is the fact that Bruno is the main outlet for United across the board. Now, you can have your opinion on whether or not he's the right man for United in that position, but that doesn't change the fact that Bruno has the ball often because it's his responsibility to make sure something happens the entire 90 minutes. Essentially, every manager that Bruno's played under at United is giving him the keys to everything, saying, here you go, you do everything, get the ball, do everything. In fact, in almost every season since he's joined, Bruno has played pretty much every single minute of football he's been able to. And as a result, he's led the team in assists and also in passing metrics. Clearly an indicator of how much time Bruno is getting on the ball. In fact, many people praise Bruno for his vision and his ability to create plays where others have failed in the past. Bruno is clearly an attacking outlet that's able to do a lot of work when he has the ball and when things are flowing for United. And even when things aren't going well, it's his ability to connect with teammates and really help United push past those tough times. The guy is a creative machine and he's always trying to play his teammates in when he sees the right move open up. It's not always going to work out when you're making these plays, hence the possession lost. In fact, this season, the guy has pretty much done everything for United, which goes to show there's only so far the lost possessions that can take you in the analysis of a player. When you have players like Bruno, KDB, Madison, that's not to say that they're all on the same levels, but players who are focal points of their team, they're gonna lead in all these attacking and passing metrics, and possession loss is just gonna be a byproduct of having to dictate play for your side. Essentially, look at it this way. You have the ball so often, you're gonna be doing things. These guys are world class, right? It becomes a question of how do you watch football? Are you a XG, XA type of watcher, or are you a that boy is nice type of player, if you know what I'm saying? Another thing that Bruno is constantly grabbing headlines for is how petulant he is on the pitch. In my opinion, this really isn't as excusable as a possession loss criticism. There's a specific level of professionalism and sportsmanship that people expect from footballers at the highest level. If you got guys scrapping at Sunday league or five-a-side, it's kind of expected, right? But it's different for these guys who are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. And for Bruno, he unfortunately has moments where this type of professionalism, sportsmanship gets completely thrown out the window. On multiple occasions, Bruno has complained pretty aggressively towards the referees in hopes that it would aid a decision towards United. On top of this, Bruno has a tendency to show some pretty nasty body language that really makes him out to look pretty poorly. Flailing arms isn't really what you hope to see from one of the players who's meant to be the most composed on the pitch. What makes Bruno's attitude problem even worse is that he's currently the captain of the club. Before he stepped into the role, a lot of United fans thought he would be the right man to take the captaincy role for a reason that I'll get into in just a second. His captaincy era was following Harry Maguire's, which honestly should have been able to buy Bruno a lot of time considering how poorly Maguire was perceived as captain. Bruno was expected to be a commanding voice on the pitch and lead the team figuratively and literally through the Ten Hag era. However, unfortunately for him, in his time as captain, he has pretty much been labeled a crybaby, and at times literally called a petulant child by pundits who felt that his behavior was unwarranted. There's also sentiment that his behavior is rubbing off on the rest of the squad, since he is meant to be the example for everyone else as a captain. And honestly, I can say I kind of agree with that to an extent. Many times Bruno acts pretty poorly, and I'd rather he just keep it pushing in order to keep our rhythm going. Footballers are human, so I'm not saying he has to show zero emotion on the pitch, but he does need to get better at pushing it aside to make sure that the team is still flowing well, especially in the heat of the moment. I will say, however, to call Bruno Fernandes a rat and kind of just abuse him online, a little bit too much. Maybe some fans are a little bit too invested, you know? And speaking of investments, one thing that Bruno actually does receive a lot of praise for is just how committed he is to United. And I don't just mean that from a standpoint where he isn't actively looking for transfers away, but rather the fact that even at his worst moments, you can visibly see that he's giving 100% for the club. Bruno, time after time, is ready to go to war for United. This is one of the main reasons that fans wanted to see Bruno as club captain. As I mentioned earlier, Bruno has played pretty much every single game that he has had the opportunity to play in. Since he arrived at the club, Bruno has accumulated 230 appearances in just 4.5 seasons. What's even more mind-boggling is the fact that he's only missed 6 games. That is insane. This guy must be made out of vibranium or something. There's no way he's played that many games and only missed 6. You have to keep in mind too that this current United team is absolutely riddled with injuries, and yet Bruno has managed to be a part of the squad the entire season. Funny enough, he just mentioned in an interview that he's very loosely starting to think about life outside of United, but for the time being, he's still committed to giving it his all. Say what you want about the guy in regards to his output or his pass completion or whatever you want to nitpick, but he's definitely a warrior out there on the pitch for United. It's nice to have somebody with the quality of Bruno Fernandes, always ready to go out and fight for the badge. One more quick criticism that Bruno did receive, which honestly is a little bit ridiculous to me, is how many penalties he scored in the 2020-21 season. Granted, many of these complaints and criticisms came from outside the United space, since rival fans really couldn't fathom how many penalties United were getting. In case you weren't there for this campaign, out of the 28 goals that Bruno scored this season, 13 of them were penalties. Bruno has a very effective penalty style, so he only missed 1 penalty this entire season. Although I will say the criticism here doesn't fully lie on Bruno. A lot of people were simply just upset at the volume that United was getting penalties. Were some of them dives? Maybe. But ultimately, the penalties were flying in left, right, and center. In fact, this season, we were awarded a penalty after the final whistle blew. When have you ever seen that in football? But this all came to an end when Klopp complained about how many penalties United were getting. Since then, United have been robbed many penalties, and thus Bruno's goal scoring numbers have dropped. Not drastically, but they've definitely not been as high since he scored all those penalties. I will say this did lead to a little bit of infighting amongst United fans, as some people felt that Bruno was stat padding and penalties were allowing him to cover up some really bad performances, while others simply just enjoyed the show and enjoyed the wins that United was getting. Bruno's a very interesting player. He's undoubtedly one of, if not the second best creative minds in the Premier League, but it's the negative aspects about him that stop any argument for Bruno to become the best right to a halt. The guy has 79 goals and 64 assists for United, constantly topping passing metrics, is always a reliable presence in the squad, captain of the club, always full of energy, and yet so many people are just not sold on him. Whether it be the fact that Bruno plays many passes that don't work in a game where United fall short and end up losing, or the attitude that he presents himself with and in turn represents the club with, both rival and United fans find themselves questioning if Bruno is deserving of the position that he finds himself in. You either love him or you hate him. He's the true definition of a polarizing player. But that's just a quick overview of some of his praises and criticism, boys. You guys can let me know what you think about Bruno in the comments down below. I personally am a big fan of Bruno Fernandes. I love him at the club. I hope he doesn't end up leaving. Could he definitely improve in some aspects? 1000%. But I do think he he is great at United. He can definitely help push us forward if Ten Hag does end up leaving, which he probably is. But again, like I said, you guys can let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But most importantly, would you take Bruno Fernandes at your club?